You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. The smell of black coffee hit me before I even opened my eyes. That was my Saturday alarm these days. No clock, no schedule, just habit and caffeine. I eased out of bed, my joints cracking like someone stepping on dry twigs. Getting old isn't for cowards. My name is Elliot Granger. I'm 78 years old. I live alone in a house I built myself after I retired from flying commercial jets for over 40 years. The place sits on a little hill above Lake Pend Oreille in Montana. Quiet. Too quiet some days. I shuffled into the kitchen, poured my coffee, and stood at the window overlooking the lake. The water was flat this morning, like glass. I could see the airstrip across the field to the south, the little one where the crop dusters and hobbyists took off. My Piper cub used to sit in a hangar there. Marlene used to wave me off from the porch like it was still romantic. That was before the cancer came, before the long silence she left behind. Her photo was still on the fridge, held up by an old magnet from some air show in Wisconsin. She had this half smile in that picture, like she knew a joke nobody else did. I reached out, tapped the photo like I always did, and said, "Mornin', hun." I sat at the table with my coffee, scrolling through my phone even though I already knew what I'd find. Nothing. No texts, no missed calls, not from Darren anyway. He used to call back when Marlene was still here, back when he still tried to pretend, but the calls stopped after the last argument. He told me I was never really around when he was a kid, told me every birthday and school play I missed left a mark. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. He was right. I was always in the air, always somewhere else. Darren resented my whole life's work, the flying, the travel, the way I was home, but never there. I didn't know how to be a father back then. Hell, I barely knew how to be a husband. Marlene did the heavy lifting. I just brought the money home and thought that was enough. I finished my coffee and washed the cup by hand. Another old habit. I didn't trust dishwashers, never did. Then I laced up my walking shoes, slow and careful, and grabbed my jacket, time to head to the cafe. It was a little place by the airstrip, run by a woman named Patty, who'd been there longer than the runway. Every Saturday morning, I walked down the gravel path to get a plate of eggs and hash browns and listen to the hum of old Cessnas starting up. It was the closest thing I had to a church. The walk took about 15 minutes these days, more if my knees were acting up. But I liked the rhythm of it, birds in the trees, that sharp, sweet smell of pine sap in the sun. I nodded at the fence posts like they were old friends. This land had seen a lot. My boots knew every inch of it. At the cafe, Patty poured me coffee without asking. "Morning, Captain." "Morning," I said, sliding into my usual booth. "You look tired." "I'm 78, I said. "That's just how I look now." She chuckled and walked off. I stared out the window at the airstrip while the eggs sizzled in the back. Some kid was prepping a Cherokee, checking the flaps, tapping on the tires. I remember being that kid, hungry for sky. After breakfast, I made the walk home slower. My hip ached, but I didn't complain. Nobody was around to hear it anyway. Back at the house, I sat at the desk in my study. The desk was custom built, shaped like a cockpit. Marlene had it made for me after I retired. She said I needed a new control panel, one that kept me grounded. I looked at the photo of the three of us, me, Marlene, and Darren, taken in '92 at Glacier National Park. Darren must have been 7. We all looked like strangers to each other. I tapped the photo frame and sighed. No new messages, no calls. Another Saturday, another silent morning. The sun had crept higher by the time I started the walk back from the cafe. The gravel crunched beneath my boots and the breeze had picked up. Not strong, just enough to nudge the pines into whispering to each other. My belly was full, my coffee had been hot, and for a while, I'd forgotten the quiet that usually followed me around like a shadow. Halfway up the path to the house, it hit me. A sudden hot pain stabbed across my chest and down my left shoulder, sharp and deep, like someone had slipped a blade under the skin and twisted. I stopped in my tracks and hunched over slightly, trying to breathe through it. "Damn it," I muttered under my breath. "Not today." I waited. 1 breath, 2. The pain didn't grow, but it didn't go away either. I rested my hand on a fence post, pretending I was just admiring the view, in case one of the neighbors was watching. Old pilots don't like showing weakness. We were trained to keep flying until we absolutely couldn't. After another minute, the pressure began to ease. My shoulder still ached, but it was dull now, manageable. I straightened up slowly and kept walking, but the tightness in my chest stayed with me all the way home, like a warning light on the dash you keep meaning to check. Inside, I poured myself a glass of water, took 2 aspirin, and sat at my desk. The one Marlene had custom-built after my retirement, mahogany, curved like a cockpit, with switch-like drawer handles and a built-in compass she had ordered from some specialty shop in Oregon. I used to think it was too sentimental. Now it was the only place in the house that still felt like it knew who I was. The photo sat right in the middle of the desk, the 3 of us. Glacier National Park, 1992. I was in uniform. Marlene was in a denim jacket, her hair windblown and wild. Darren was wearing a plastic pilot's cap, smiling like he actually believed I was some kind of hero. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I opened the lower drawer and pulled out the safe box. Thumbprint scan, code, click. Inside were the papers I kept hoping I'd never need. My will, trust documents, property agreements, all the legal knots Roscoe Bell helped me tie tight. I flipped through them slowly, reading line by line, even though I'd memorized most of it. I had left almost everything to Darren's boys, not to Darren himself. I couldn't trust him with it, not after the way he handled Marlene's final months, always with a handout, always acting like grief gave him permission to spend without thought. The house was protected now, classified as a historical structure under state aviation heritage law. Couldn't be torn down, couldn't be sold without multiple approvals. Darren would hate that. He called it a dusty museum with plumbing. Good. If I couldn't make peace with my son, I could at least protect the only thing I built with my bare hands and make damn sure it stayed standing. I had just finished relocking the safe when my phone buzzed on the desk. Caller ID, Darren. I stared at the screen for a second too long, thumb hovering. He rarely called. When he did, it meant one thing, a problem, dressed up like a favor. I answered. Dad, he said brightly, a little too brightly. Hey, how are you feeling? Same as always, I said, flat. There was a beat of silence before he chuckled. Well, that's good. You sound sharp. Still walking to that dusty little cafe every Saturday? I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. So, listen. I've been thinking about the house. I know we've talked about it before, but I really think now might be the right time to, make a change. There it was, the real reason for the call. What change? I asked, though I already knew. Well, he began, dragging out the word like he was trying to sound gentle. It's a big property, Dad. A lot to keep up, and you're getting older. I mean, what happens if you fall, or if something breaks and no one's around? I manage just fine, I said. But for how long? I've been talking to some folks, and with the property values out there right now, you could sell that place for a fortune. You'd be set for life. We could help you transition into something smaller, maybe a facility closer to us in Denver. You want me in a nursing home, I said flatly. No, he said quickly. It's just a community. You'd have support, activities, other people your age. I stared out the window. A bird landed on the railing, a blue jay. I watched it tilt its head, then dart away. The house isn't for sale, I said. He sighed into the phone. Come on, Dad. Be reasonable. It's just a house. No, I said, louder this time. It's not. Look, he snapped, dropping the act. You're sitting on a gold mine and doing nothing with it. You don't even need the space. The boys could use help with tuition, and I've got my own bills to worry about. I'm not your piggy bank, I interrupted. You're not anything if you're dead in that house alone. That's when it hit me again. Not the anger, the pain. It came sharper this time. Chest, arm, neck. My breath caught. My mouth tried to form words, but they didn't come out right. Dad. Darren's voice was louder now. Are you still there? I gripped the edge of the desk with one hand. The other fumbled for the phone as it slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. Dad. Hello. What's going on? I couldn't speak. My tongue felt too big. My vision dimmed at the edges, tunneling in. I could still hear his voice through the speaker, panicked now. Oh my God, are you... Dad, pick up the phone. Where's your emergency list? Where the hell is it? I slipped sideways out of the chair. Everything went black. My last thought wasn't about the pain. It wasn't even about dying. It was fear, not of death, but of Darren finding a way to get everything before I could stop him. And then, nothing. I came to with a sharp, disorienting jolt. The world was a swirl of sterile white light and the faint hum of machines. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my mind. My right arm felt heavy, like it belonged to someone else. My legs. They didn't seem to be working properly either. "Elliot," a voice called out softly. It was a woman's voice, gentle but concerned. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick, too heavy to move. I swallowed hard, trying again. What happened? The nurse appeared at my side, her face wrinkled with concern. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You had a stroke, Mr. Granger. Ischemic. You've been unconscious for a while, but you're awake now. Do you know where you are?" I tried to focus, but the room seemed to shift in and out of clarity. My head pounded, and I could feel the fog of confusion wrapping around me like a blanket. But then, through the haze, I saw something. A figure standing near the door. My son, Darren. He looked different, tighter, more manicured, like he had walked straight out of a boardroom. His smile, the one he wore when he needed something, was on full display. It didn't reach his eyes. "Dad," he said, moving toward me. His voice was soft, syrupy even. I narrowed my eyes, not trusting it. "I didn't expect to see you like this." I tried to move my hand, to lift it, to do anything, but nothing obeyed. Panic bubbled in my chest. I could feel my heart race, a painful reminder of my fragility. Darren, oblivious to my struggle, continued, "I've been handling things in your absence. I've been talking to the hospital staff, the insurance people. I know you've got a lot to worry about, but I think it's time we discuss options for you." He paused, looking at me with that same practiced look. "You can't stay here forever, Dad. It's not safe, not with your health. We should look into a place in Denver. You'll be close to me, close to the boys, and you'll have everything you need." His words twisted around in my brain, disjointed. A nursing facility, Denver, the boys, a better place. His voice was too smooth, too rehearsed. I wanted to speak, to demand an explanation, but all I could manage was a weak grunt. Darren's eyes flicked to the nurse, and she nodded, as if in agreement. My head swam again. "You know, we've been making arrangements," Darren said, leaning in a little closer. "I've been handling it all. You're going to be taken care of, just like we talked about." What the hell was he talking about? Handled it all. My heart pounded harder in my chest. Number. I wasn't ready to let him have control of everything. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. I needed to communicate. I needed to warn someone. My thoughts were clear, even if my body wasn't cooperating. With trembling fingers, I managed to shift slightly, reaching for the pad of paper on the side table. Slowly, I scribbled a note, my handwriting unsteady. "Contact Roscoe." I tapped the nurse's arm as she moved to adjust the IV and handed her the note. She looked at it, then back at me with concern. "Roscoe, your attorney." I nodded, mouth dry. I couldn't say the words, but I needed Roscoe. I needed him to know what was happening. I couldn't trust Darren, not with anything. The nurse left, and Darren shifted closer to me, still talking, still going on about arrangements, about what was best for me. His words blurred together like noise, distant and hollow. His face came into sharper focus as he leaned over me, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it. I already knew the game he was playing. I wasn't sure how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, but it was long enough for a feeling of dread to settle deep in my gut. Darren wasn't here to help me. He was here to take control. He thought I was helpless. And maybe I was, for now. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not yet. Not ever. The days after I woke in the hospital felt like I was swimming through a thick fog. Every movement, every word, took longer than it should. I couldn't feel my right arm, and my left leg felt like it belonged to someone else. Even speaking was a challenge. My tongue felt like a foreign object, too big for my mouth. But somehow, despite all that, my mind was as sharp as ever. It had to be. I had to make a plan. Roscoe Bell had been my attorney for years, a man who understood the value of caution. His thick glasses and deep, gravelly voice had always been a source of comfort for me. I trusted him. I needed him now more than ever. I had to get him involved before Darren did something I couldn't undo. I couldn't let my son have control, not after everything I had worked for, not when it felt like Darren was already trying to take everything from me. One afternoon, after a long, grueling session with the physical therapist, I was left alone in the room again, the silence thick around me. I could feel the weight of the room pressing in, the ticking clock, the beep of the machines, the air too sterile and cold. I reached for the small pad and pen they had given me for notes. My hand shook as I wrote, but I managed to scrawl what I needed. Roscoe, urgent, call him now. The nurse entered shortly after, her smile warm but distracted. She was young, probably fresh out of school, trying to make a difference. I couldn't even remember her name, but I didn't care. I handed her the note, keeping my eyes trained on hers as I slowly mouthed, "Call him." I gestured to the phone on the table, the one near my bed, the one that had become as much of a prison as the bed itself. She looked at the note, then at me, nodding slowly. "I'll take care of it, Mr. Granger," she said. I watched her leave the room, hoping I had made myself clear enough. I couldn't speak to Roscoe yet. My voice was too weak, slurred, barely a whisper, but I needed him to understand the urgency. Darren was making moves behind my back, trying to control everything I had. He thought he could just swoop in and make decisions for me, for my future, as though it was his right. But I had plans too, plans he couldn't touch. The nurse came back an hour later with some water, but there was no word from Roscoe yet. I waited, trying to keep my mind sharp, doing my best not to drift into the fog of exhaustion that tugged at me with every passing minute. The next day, Roscoe finally appeared, his thick brown coat making him look even larger in the sterile hospital room. I could see the concern in his eyes, but I knew he wouldn't ask too many questions. He trusted me. "Elliot," he said softly, taking a seat next to my bed, "how are you holding up?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up the pen again, slow and deliberate, and wrote on the pad, "Darren's selling the house. Has been showing buyers around. He's already talking about a future plan." Roscoe read the note, his brow furrowed, and his lips tightened into a thin line. "I thought you were clear about that. We locked it down tight." I nodded, the fear creeping up in my chest again. "He's trying to take it. He's already got someone lined up." Roscoe's face hardened. "I'll handle it. I'll check the house's security, the aviation trust agreements. Don't worry, Elliot, I've got this." I wrote again, everything. The plane, the house, the trust. Keep it safe. I'll make sure no one touches anything. We'll get this sorted out. He stood up, his expression hardening with determination. He wasn't going to let Darren walk all over me. Not while I still had a say in it. I could feel a little weight lifting off my shoulders, though the pain in my chest remained, gnawing at me. But I wasn't completely helpless. I still had people I could trust, people who would stand by me. For now, that would have to be enough. A few days had passed since Roscoe's visit. My speech was still thick and slow, and moving my right arm felt like lifting a brick. But the fog was clearing. The days were stretching out in front of me, each one feeling longer than the last, as if I were trying to climb out of something deep and heavy. I couldn't be sure, but I had the feeling Darren was still trying to manipulate things behind my back. He thought he could control me, control everything I had worked for. And now that I was vulnerable, I knew he would try to make his move. I spent the days in physical therapy, pushing myself even when it hurt. I had no choice. The stroke had taken away my independence, and the last thing I could afford was letting him steal what was left. But even the exercises felt like a small victory. Each time I managed to sit up or move my fingers, I held on to that progress, even if it was just a few inches forward. It was the sound of my phone buzzing late one afternoon that stopped me mid-repetition on the bench press. I had just about gotten my right hand to hold the bar for a full set when the phone vibrated, reminding me of my isolation. The number on the screen stopped me cold. Darren. I reached for it, careful with my left hand. It took me a few moments to steady my breathing and push myself into an upright position, not wanting to lose the chance to hear him out. The phone crackled as I answered. "Dad." His voice was unnervingly calm, too calm. I narrowed my eyes, already suspicious. "Darren?" "Yeah, it's me," he replied. There was a slight hesitation, but nothing out of the ordinary. "I've been thinking about the house again, and we really need to finalize things. You know, the sooner the better." "Finalizing things," I echoed, my voice hoarse. My blood was already starting to simmer. "What are you talking about?" "You know," he said too quickly, "about selling it. I've got a couple buyers lined up. They're really interested, and they've got great offers. It's a good deal, Dad. You don't want to miss out. You can't keep this place up forever. You're not getting any younger. I clenched my jaw. I wanted to scream at him, but I kept my voice steady. The house isn't for sale, Darren. I've told you that before. Right, but look, he continued, ignoring me completely. There's no reason to hold on to something so big. The future's unpredictable. You don't need the headache. And, well, the property's value is only going up. I really think you should consider... I interrupted him. I've already made my decision. My heart was pounding. I could feel the anger rising, but I had to stay in control. I'm not selling, Darren. Well, that's where you're wrong, Dad, he snapped. It's my decision now. I've already made arrangements. I blinked, trying to process what he'd just said. What arrangements? The house, the buyers, everything, Darren replied, his voice chillingly calm. I've already shown the place. We've signed papers. It's done. You don't need to worry about it. What? My breath hitched as the words sank in. My chest tightened again. This time not from the stroke, but from the raw, unexpected betrayal. You sold it. You've sold my house without even talking to me. He sighed, the sound condescending, like I was some foolish child. It's for your own good, Dad. You're not in any condition to make decisions right now. This is the best thing for you. I don't want your help, I managed to say, though my voice was slurred with frustration. You don't get to make decisions for me anymore, Darren. Not like this. I could hear him shifting on the other end, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. It's done, he repeated. And don't forget, I've also sold the plane. The Piper Cub. That felt like a punch to the gut. You sold the plane too, I whispered, too stunned to even raise my voice. Yes, Darren said, smugly now. I've done what's necessary. You'll thank me later, Dad. You'll see. No, I said, voice shaking. You're not in control. You're not handling anything. You've crossed the line, Darren. I have everything recorded. Everything. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him breathing, trying to steady himself. But I wasn't finished. You'll regret this. I'm filing a fraud report. This isn't over. He laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was hollow, dismissive. You don't have the strength to stop me. And besides, it's for your own good. I didn't respond. Instead, I pressed the button to end the call, feeling the weight of the silence settle in my chest. The phone dropped to my lap, and I stared at the wall for a long time. I had just heard Darren admit to his betrayal. He'd crossed the line, and now I had to act. But I wasn't going to let him win. Not this time. The days after my conversation with Darren blurred together. Each day, the pain in my chest seemed to remind me how fragile I was. How close I had come to losing everything. Or worse, losing my chance to stop Darren. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Roscoe showed up. He walked into my hospital room with that same determined look he'd worn since the first day we'd met, decades ago. The man didn't change, even as everything else in my life had. Elliot, he said with a firm handshake, I've got some updates. I couldn't speak, but I nodded, thankful that Roscoe had been there to help me through this mess. He pulled up a chair next to my bed, his expression grim. I've been through the footage you had me review. And I've got something, he said, pulling out a thick envelope filled with documents. Darren's been showing buyers around the house. He even had fraudulent sale documents drawn up. I couldn't believe it. He'd gone that far, to actually sell my home, my legacy, while I was incapacitated. I had made all the right moves, locked up the estate behind safeguards, but Darren found a way to break through them, twisting everything for his benefit. Wait a minute, I managed to croak, my words still weak. The plane. Roscoe nodded, his brow furrowed. Sold it, the Piper Cub. It's already gone. I couldn't even breathe for a second. The plane. It wasn't just a piece of metal to me. It was a connection to everything. Marlene, the years I spent flying, the memories that stayed alive every time I saw it parked in the hangar. I'm going to handle it, Roscoe continued, steady as ever. I'll get the buyers to reverse the transactions. But, Elliot, he paused, they want their money back. I nodded, trying to focus on the plan. The buyers would return the property and the plane, but I had no illusions about Darren. He wouldn't go down without a fight. At that moment, I made a decision. Roscoe had already been invaluable, but I needed to put everything into action. If Darren thought he could just walk away with what was mine, he was wrong. He needed to understand that. Get it back, I whispered, though it was barely audible. and get it fast. Roscoe leaned forward, his voice low. I'll contact Detective Emery from the State Financial Crimes Unit. This isn't just about selling the property. It's a fraud case. I'll make sure we have everything documented. So, when we go after him, it sticks. I stared at him, knowing Roscoe was right. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was theft, and Darren needed to be held accountable. I'll call Darren, Roscoe said, standing up. I'll give him an ultimatum. 72 hours to return the funds or face felony charges. Good, I rasped. He's not getting away with this. As Roscoe left the room to make the call, I tried to gather my thoughts. My body still felt like it was made of stone, but my mind was sharper than ever. I would fight for this, no matter how weak I was. Darren's days of getting what he wanted at my expense were over. The fight had just begun. The call from Detective Emery came late one morning, after weeks of racing against time. Roscoe had worked tirelessly, gathering evidence, calling in favors, and securing proof of Darren's fraudulent activities. We were finally seeing some movement, but nothing had prepared me for the revelation that followed. Elliot, Emery said, her voice tight, we've been tracking Darren's activities. He's gone. What do you mean, gone? I asked, my pulse quickening, despite the haze of weakness still lingering from the stroke. He disappeared, she continued, clearly frustrated. We checked his accounts. Everything's been emptied. His car's gone. His wife and kids are gone, too. We believe they've left the country. Where? I croaked, struggling to sit up in my hospital bed. I was already dreading the answer. We're thinking South America, maybe Panama. They're good at covering their tracks, but we're working on it. I felt a strange numbness in my chest. Part of me had always known Darren would bolt if things started to unravel, but hearing it out loud brought a bitter sting. He had taken everything, the house, the plane, even the memories. How could he just vanish? I muttered, the words slipping out as more of a breath than a question. Money talks, Elliot, Emery said, and he had a plan. We're tracking his movements, and we'll find him, but for now, we need to act quickly. I sank back into the pillow, my head spinning. I had spent so many years building this life, this legacy, and now Darren had taken it all, but not without leaving some evidence behind. Is there anything left? I asked. I wasn't sure if I was asking about my money or about any shred of decency left in Darren. We've recovered some of your property, Emery said, her voice softening. Your pilot's watch. It was pawned off in a shop downtown. It's with us now, but the rest is still out there. I closed my eyes for a moment, the memory of Marlene's father's watch weighing heavily on me. It had been passed down to me as a symbol of my connection to the skies, to the life I had led. Seeing it in someone else's hands was a slap in the face. But it was a victory, however small. Good, I murmured. Take whatever you can get back. We'll figure out the rest later. Roscoe arrived shortly after, his face clouded with the kind of solemnity that had become all too familiar. He had been my anchor in all of this, always calm, always steady. As he sat beside my bed, I saw the weight of the situation in his eyes. We've got to rewrite the will, Elliot, he said quietly. We can't let Darren have anything. He's made it clear that he's willing to do anything to take what's yours. I nodded, knowing what had to be done. The trust for my grandsons would stay intact, but Darren would be cut out entirely. He had made his choice, and now, so had I. Over the next few days, the house sale became the least of my worries. The buyers I had almost sold to, a kind family from a nearby town, were still interested in the property. Roscoe had talked to them, and they were willing to proceed, albeit at a reduced price. I agreed. The house wasn't mine to keep anymore, but it was still a place for someone else to make memories. I wanted it to be full of life, not haunted by betrayal. My own home had been a place of joy for so many years. But it was time to move on. Time to let go. In a small office near the reservoir, I began the process of moving my life again. With Roscoe's help, we found a new place, a cozy cottage by the water, the kind of home Marlene and I had always talked about when we dreamed of retirement. It was quiet and simple, just what I needed. When I stepped into that cottage for the first time, I felt a weight lift off my chest. There were no ghosts here, no reminders of Darren's lies. Just a fresh start. The final blow came when I rewrote my will, signing the papers with a steady hand. I didn't need Darren's chaos in my life anymore. What mattered now was peace, and my grandsons. I was free. The weight of the past had always been heavier in that house. The walls had seen so much: laughter, fights, love, loss. It had been Marlene's and mine, built together from the ground up. But now, with everything that had happened, I could no longer hold on to the memories. The ghosts had started to outnumber the good ones. It was a crisp, clear morning when I met with the family that had almost bought the house. They were eager, kind, and their eyes held a spark of life I hadn't felt in a while. They reminded me of what the house should be, full of children's laughter, filled with warmth. It had been a dream of Marlene's, and it was hard to imagine it in anyone else's hands. But it was time. Roscoe sat beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. He didn't speak much during the meeting. This wasn't his battle, it was mine. The family, David and Sarah, with their 2 young children, Ethan and Lily, stood by the windows, chatting about how they'd remodel the kitchen, how they could make the garden bloom in the spring. There was a gentle kind of excitement in their voices, a kind that hadn't sounded so real in a long time, especially not in this house. I watched them quietly as they envisioned their future here. I didn't need to sell it at the reduced price, not with the money I'd gotten back from the fraud recovery, but something about the way they spoke made me think that this was right. They weren't just buying a house, they were buying a home, one that would be filled with joy, love, and laughter. That's what I wanted for it. After they left, Roscoe and I sat on the porch, the silence stretching comfortably between us as the sun began its descent toward the mountains. The house, with all its memories, was still there, but the weight of it had started to lift. "I think you did the right thing, Elliot," Roscoe said, his voice quiet. "It's time for a change." This house, it was never just about bricks and mortar. It was about you and Marlene. I nodded, looking out at the horizon where the sky met the lake. The place was beautiful, peaceful, but it wasn't just the scenery that was changing. It was me, too. I had to let go, not just of the house, but of the past that kept me chained to it. Later, as I packed up the last few boxes, Chuck, my old neighbor and the one person I could always count on, pulled into the driveway in his beat-up truck. He'd been the one to find me after my stroke, the one who made sure I wasn't left alone for too long. He'd been my eyes and ears when I couldn't trust my own. "Need a hand?" Chuck called out, waving as he approached. I smiled, a little relieved. Chuck's weathered hands had helped me build this place. He had no reason to stick around, but here he was. "I think I'm all packed," I said, my voice hoarse from a long day of clearing out memories. Chuck gave a low chuckle. "You've still got a lot of life left in you, Elliot. Don't go thinking it's all behind you." I knew what he meant. The past had its hold, but I was finally ready to release it. We moved my things to the car and drove over to the cottage near the quiet reservoir, the place I had always dreamed of having with Marlene, a place where the air was fresh and the water never stopped moving. It was small but cozy, and everything I needed to start over. As I stood in the front yard, watching the sun dip behind the trees, I felt the old house, the old life, slipping further away. The ghosts were still there, but they weren't so loud anymore. I could breathe again. I could let go. "Here we are," Chuck said, his voice heavy with a mix of nostalgia and understanding. "New beginnings, huh?" I nodded. "Yeah, new beginnings." As I unpacked in my new cottage, with the quiet of the reservoir all around, I reflected on everything I had lost, but also what I had gained. I hadn't been sure about cutting Darren out, but I knew it was necessary. There was too much at stake: my dignity, my legacy, and my peace. I couldn't afford to hold on to him any longer. In the end, it was about family, but not the kind I had expected. This family, the one I was building for myself, with friends like Chuck and the memories of Marlene, was the one that mattered. I poured a drink and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool, the kind of stillness that invited reflection. As the last light of the day faded, I felt at peace for the first time in months. I had let go of what weighed me down, and now I was ready to move forward. The first few weeks in the new cottage were quiet, but not in the way that I had feared. The silence felt different here, softer. The kind of peace that came from being alone, but not lonely. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of my past, in the house Marlene and I had built together. It had taken a lot to walk away from it, a lot of pain. But here, on the edge of this quiet reservoir, I found something I hadn't expected: relief. I woke each morning with the sun like I used to, but now the view was different. Instead of the endless blue sky and the vast openness I'd flown through for years, there was a small stretch of water that seemed to embrace me. I could sit on the porch with my coffee, watching the small planes up above, remembering the days when I'd been the one in control of the sky. My joints ached as they always had, but it didn't matter as much anymore. I had let go. Gardening became my new morning ritual. There was something satisfying in the earth between my fingers, in the way the plants seemed to settle into their new life. Maybe it was the same way I was learning to settle into mine. I wasn't trying to forget the past. I was just making space for something new. Marlene had always loved flowers. I could almost hear her laugh as I planted the first row of bright blooms along the edge of the house. I didn't need to be flying anymore to feel alive. Life could be smaller now, more peaceful. Chuck had been a constant in my life, and even now, as I navigated this quieter world, he was there, helping me move boxes or just sitting with me in the evenings. He had always known how to make a joke of things, even when they were hard. His presence had been the last bit of anchor I needed to feel secure in this decision. Then one afternoon, I received a letter. The envelope was postmarked from Panama, and my stomach tightened when I saw it. It was from Darren. The contents were brief. Dad, I just wanted to let you know that the boys are safe. I know things between us are complicated, but they're doing well. I hope you're doing all right, Darren. There was no apology, no attempt at reconciliation. It was exactly what I had expected. A cold, detached statement, as if everything could be washed away with a few words. He hadn't even mentioned the mess he'd left behind, the fraud, the lies, the stolen years. I set the letter down on the table and stared out at the water. A part of me still ached for the son I had lost. I wasn't blind to the fact that Darren had his own demons, his own pain that had twisted him into who he was now. But that didn't excuse the way he'd betrayed me, how he'd taken everything without a second thought. I stood up and walked outside, the cool breeze brushing my face. It was the first time in a long while that I felt truly free. There would be no more scrambling to fix what couldn't be fixed, no more pretending that things could go back to the way they were. Darren had made his choices, and I had made mine. The legacy I left behind wasn't going to be defined by blood. It would be defined by the dignity I held onto when everything else was falling apart. That evening, Chuck came over with a couple of beers, and we sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the lake. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, a new day on the horizon. "I'll drink to that," Chuck said, raising his bottle. "To a new course, my friend." I clinked my bottle against his, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "To new beginnings." And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. My future was my own again. No one could take that from me, no matter what had happened in the past. I watched the planes in the distance, small dots in the vastness of the sky. It was a reminder, not of what I had lost, but of what I still had. A life rebuilt, a life worth living, even without the things I thought defined me. The legacy I had built was not in a house or a plane. It was in the integrity with which I faced the world now. It was in the quiet moments, like this one, shared with a friend who still saw me for who I truly was, and for the first time, I was proud of what I had left behind. I raised my bottle, not just to the new course, but to the future I was finally ready to embrace.